Now maybe, just maybe, if you've been living under a rock, you've not heard about the ongoing GameStop saga. And if you haven't, maybe it's for the best. Who knows? But I'm going to give a very, very brief summary of what has happened because A, I am neither a financier nor an investor, and B, more importantly, I want to talk about the general social interpretation and repercussions of this saga. Now, the very, very short version of this was that GameStop wasn't doing very well, so a hedge fund, Melvin Capital, was massively shorting, and a bunch of normal people, that is, not hedge fund managers and not Wall Street people, encouraged by Reddit and some other personages, ended up massively buying GameStop shares, which forced the price up, and in order to cover their behinds, Melvin Capital was forced to buy, and they lost a lot of money to the point where another hedge fund had to intervene and bail them out. That is the very, very long and short of it, and you will find a plethora of channels that are far more savvy and far more knowledgeable and far more interested in the nitty-gritty details of the stock aspect of this. I'm more interested in the anthropological, the social aspects, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. You see, what has occurred with GameStop fundamentally illustrates something that we can observe repeatedly and have done on this channel for quite some time, and that is the distinction and separation between normal everyday people and these people living in their imagined palaces. And some of you might know the phrase, which is both a mistranslation of the French and a misattribution to Marie Antoinette during the French Revolution. She probably didn't say that. It was probably somebody else, and they weren't actually talking about cake. But famously, it is alleged she said, "Let them eat cake," when she had heard that the peasants no longer had flour to make bread, and so they were suffering. But whether or not this is apocryphal doesn't really matter, because the sense of this statement remains, and that is, let them suffer, who cares? I don't care. That's what is meant by let them eat cake. Oh, they don't have enough resources to make bread, who cares? And that attitude effectively has been what has been ongoing in specifically the United States, but more broadly the West, but very specifically the United States, because these people, whether they are money movers on Wall Street or they are technocrats in Silicon Valley or elsewhere, do not give a rat's buttocks for the plight of most Americans. They don't care about the situation on the ground, the everyday man. They don't care. Until, of course, there's some sort of intersection which affects them, which is what has happened with GameStop. These people who run the hedge funds don't like that normal people have screwed up their little game, which they thought they were specifically entitled to, and that no one else was allowed to play. And to the extent they were allowed to play, they were only allowed to play as long as they didn't actually succeed. Those were the tacit conditions laid down by the money movers, and people like them. And what we've seen in the aftermath of this politically is a division in politicians who are thinking about their course of action, of course. They're thinking, well, what should I do? Should I stand up for the little man and gain popularity by doing that? Or should I support the establishment, the powers that be, and maintain my position? And there's some division on this. You can see various pundits weighing in on this and offering statements and opinions, but I think very few of them are authentic or genuine in any way, shape, or form. They're simply just observing the trends and deciding which way the wind blows. And now, anyone who's looked into this realizes that some of the people, maybe even many of the people who participated in this GameStop saga, the normal people, were people that had lost tremendously during the economic crisis of 2008, which, as we know, was caused by indifference and gross negligence on the part of these Wall Street types. And by doing this, they are, in effect, enacting a type of revenge, or at least trying to pursue some means of justice. And the reality is that this is the only way these days that any sort of fairness can occur. And why do I say that? Because in a former bygone age, say a feudal system, or even a system in early modern times, the degree of accountability between quote-unquote lords and their servants, and I'm not saying that we live in a society of lords and servants, although maybe we do, depends on how you interpret it, was such that they had to be held accountable, and they could be held accountable. Because the consequence of not performing or fulfilling your duty as a lord, frankly speaking, was mobs of angry people with pitchforks. Now, pitchforks don't work anymore. You're not going to get a whole crowd of angry people with pitchforks. What can be done, seemingly, is beating them at their own game, which is what happened with the GameStop saga. The problem here is that the powers that be are crying and whining to the government, and they're probably going to have legislation enacted that prevents this sort of thing in the future, but there's no accountability. And so, born out of this lack of accountability, you have a complete indifference and a complete perception of separation between people who are doing these sorts of things in the hallowed halls of Wall Street and the everyday man just trying to make ends meet and get by. It is a very, very dangerous situation. And this wasn't always the case. I'm not the first person to point this out. People like Charles Murray and other social scientists have pointed this out. There was a time when the wealthy in the United States made it a point to at least ostensibly appear to be participants in society. Sure, they were really wealthy. Sure, they drove nice cars. But they would, for example, live in the same neighborhood. Maybe the high-end part of the neighborhood, but they would live in the same neighborhood. You would see them at church functions. You would see them in public places because they wanted to at least appear virtuous. Whether they were virtuous or not, in reality, is of course a different question, but they wanted to appear as if they had virtue, they were good people, that they wanted to help the community, give back to the community. Even in the case of the so-called robber barons, and I don't really have a strong opinion on the robber barons one way or another, it's not really my area of historical interest, they definitely gave back. They invested in the arts and sciences and things like that. You don't really see this sort of thing anymore. Technocrats and Wall Street money movers, sure, they invest in things, but they're not doing so to appear virtuous for the sake of the community. If they're interested in particular cures and medicine, they're doing so because they think they get money off of it, not because they think it will benefit a large number of people in society. And so this is a very, very dangerous situation we find ourselves in because there's no sense of accountability. There's no sense of societal piety in the sense of what I described earlier, that you want to give back to your community. You feel as if you're part of it, at least nominally, or there's a social pressure to at least feel that way and to project that outwards. None of that exists. These people, the people on Wall Street, live in rarefied bubbles and want nothing to do with the rest of us. And more importantly, when the rest of us get involved and they actually do something that quote-unquote harms them because they were silly enough and, frankly speaking, stupid enough to make bad decisions on the stock market, they cannot tolerate it and they whine and cry for bailouts. And this is an unsustainable situation, this separation between the haves and the have-nots. Because the problem with the haves here is they're not really giving back to the economy. People who move money on Wall Street, yes, it is argued that they help market efficiency and their services are vital, but what are they really doing? Are they producing goods of value? Are they, as I said many times, building up communities? No. They're engaged in enterprise solely for themselves. And even if it were the case, in some really obscure sense, that we really needed these sorts of people manipulating markets and crashing the economy, it is very, very difficult for your average person to wrap their head around to get that sense and actually find it believable. And it is so transparently false and mendacious at this stage that nobody really believes the story anymore. And when people, pundits and the like, claim that they are providing essential services and what they do is absolutely necessary, even if it were true, no one believes it anymore. And we witnessed a lot of things happen last year. This is an extension of it. At its root, there's a deep, deep dissatisfaction in the United States of America between growing differences in potential. That's not the same thing as inequality, but potential. Because your average person, he can't make it anymore. It's a real struggle. And he knows it. And at the same time, he's told that he should be able to make it even though most of the barriers are in place and he's being screwed over. So this is a serious issue. The one time Wall Street is being made to eat cake, they cry and whinge and whine and receive bailouts. And if you pay attention to the mainstream media, they're vilifying the people who have participated in this, and it is, frankly speaking, inexcusable. I'm not a prophet, but if I were to make predictions, I could very easily say that not this precise sort of thing, but similar things in the future will happen. This is the common man's pitchfork, because everyone knows that gathering as a mob with pitchforks doesn't work anymore. They're going to have to work it from a different angle. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the bell icon to be informed of the forthcoming videos. Hit the like button, subscribe if you've not yet done so. Share the video, much appreciated. As always, if I'm still alive, I'll check you out later. Until the next time, may the gods watch over you. Bye-bye. If you liked this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content, please consider making a donation or becoming a patron. Thanks for watching.